Imagine surviving a horrific shipwreck. You spend days adrift, freezing, fighting the waves.
Right, just total survival mode.
Exactly. Until you finally wash up on a safe, sunlit beach. But instead of walking onto dry land and starting over, you refuse to leave the water.
You just stay in the ocean?
Yeah, you just cling tightly to the jagged, splintered wreckage of your ship. To anyone standing on the beach, it looks insane.
Because why wouldn't you walk towards safety?
Exactly. But to you, the wreckage is the only thing that makes sense anymore. Dry land feels entirely foreign. It feels, I don't know, too quiet, too unpredictable.
It's a really powerful image.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Today we're looking at Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's groundbreaking book, The Body Keeps a Score, and we are exploring specifically why human beings do this, why the mind and the body lock themselves in the past.
And how understanding that physiological reality is the first actionable step toward taking your life back.
Spot on. We are focusing entirely on Chapter 1 today, pulling apart the notes and the foundational concepts.
Yeah, our mission here isn't to get bogged down in decades of psychiatric history or heavy medical terminology.
Nobody wants that.
Right. It's to sit across the table from you, the listener, and look at the absolute core mechanism of human suffering. We want to understand what actually happens to our internal wiring when we experience trauma.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the book anchors this entire scientific revolution in a very specific, visceral encounter from 1978.
Yeah, the story of Tom.
Right. So a massive, disheveled man named Tom bursts into the Boston Veterans Administration clinic. He's a Vietnam veteran. He's wearing a stained three-piece suit, carrying a combat magazine, and outwardly, he is a highly successful lawyer.
But internally, his nervous system is just constantly redlining.
Totally.
The sensory environment of a Boston summer triggered this massive cascade of biological reactions. The heat, the dense summer foliage in his sister's backyard, the loud popping of the 4th of July fireworks.
Which is such a classic trigger, right?
Oh, absolutely. But these weren't just unpleasant reminders for him. They acted as a literal physiological time machine. His body transported him back to an ambush in a rice paddy in Vietnam where his entire platoon was killed or wounded.
Oh, wow. So he's physically reliving it?
Yes. He couldn't even be near his wife and his 2 young boys because their sudden movements or loud noises made him fear he would react like a soldier under attack and accidentally hurt them.
Which is just heartbreaking. So his coping mechanisms were pure isolation and adrenaline. He holed up in his downtown law office for the entire holiday.
Just completely shutting the world out.
Yeah. He drank himself into oblivion. He rode his Harley-Davidson motorcycle at terrifying breakneck speeds.
And when you look at that behavior from the outside, it's so easy to label it as reckless or self-destructive.
Right, like he's just acting out?
Exactly. But he was actually just trying to outrun his own physiology. He needed the external speed and danger of the motorcycle to match the internal chaos of his nervous system, just to feel a baseline of normalcy.
And the nights were even worse. He was so terrified of sleeping and facing the nightmares of the ambush that he would stay awake drinking until he passed out.
Yeah, sleep was the enemy.
So the medical approach at the time, and honestly an approach that's still pretty prevalent today, was purely symptom management.
Right, fix the immediate problem.
Exactly. The doctor focuses on the one symptom he believes he can control. So he prescribes Tom a psychoactive medication specifically designed to suppress those nightmares.
Which makes sense on paper.
Wait, I have to pause there. Because logically, that approach sounds completely reasonable. If a patient comes to you suffering from debilitating nightmares, you stop the nightmares, you lower the distress so the patient can function.
Right, it's standard medical practice.
But the turning point of this entire story happens 2 weeks later. Tom comes back for his follow-up, and he hasn't touched a single pill. No. He looks at the doctor and says, I realize that if I take the pills and the nightmares go away, I will have abandoned my friends and their deaths will have been in vain. I need to be a living memorial to my friends who died in Vietnam.
What's fascinating here is the profound shift in understanding that Tom's statement forces upon us. Trauma isn't just a collection of intrusive bad memories that you can cleanly medicate away.
It's so much deeper than that.
It is a complete and total reorganization of a person's reality. Tom was frozen in that rice paddy. For him, healing didn't feel like recovery.
Living a happy life in the suburbs with his family felt like a betrayal.
Exactly.
A tragic loyalty. Prescribing those pills feels like slapping a piece of tape over a broken compass.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You cover the dial so you don't have to look at the erratic needle. But underneath that tape, the magnetic pull is still fundamentally dragging that needle straight into the past.
The tape doesn't fix the magnet.
Exactly. Tom's entire sense of meaning was tethered to the men who didn't make it back.
And that shows how trauma blurs the line between loyalty and self-destruction. The traumatic event becomes the absolute center of gravity. Everything else, his law career, his family, the prospect of joy or peace, is pulled into that orbit and crushed.
It just consumes everything.
It really does. He chose to remain a living monument to tragedy because letting go of the pain meant letting go of his friends. Moving forward meant leaving them behind in the mud.
And this psychological loyalty actually alters basic human perception, which leads us to the next massive realization in the text. It changes the physical way you process visual information.
Yeah, the ink blot tests.
Right. We have notes here on a Rorschach study the author conducted with 21 veterans, and we're all familiar with the concept of an ink blot test. You look at ambiguous random shapes, and your brain naturally tries to project meaning onto them.
It's a test of mental flexibility.
Exactly. And the results of that study were just staggering. On the second card, which is the first ink blot that introduces the color red, 16 of those 21 men reacted with absolute horror.
16 out of 21.
Yeah. They didn't see abstract shapes or butterflies. They saw highly specific, gruesome images from the war. Severed body parts, blood spurting, the charred flesh of their friends.
One man actually had a full-blown physiological flashback right there in the office, panting and sweating as if he were holding a dying baby in his arms.
Just from looking at a few drops of ink on a piece of cardboard.
It's incredible.
But then you have the other 5 veterans in the study. They didn't see horror. They saw absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
Just a blank plot of ink. They couldn't project any meaning onto it whatsoever.
Stripping away the clinical jargon, what this proves is that trauma fundamentally destroys mental flexibility. It kills the imagination.
It just wipes it out.
Completely. When your nervous system is permanently locked in survival mode, it diverts all metabolic energy away from the parts of the brain responsible for creativity, play, and imagining future scenarios.
You are left with a brutal binary outcome. You either superimpose your trauma onto absolutely everything around you, or you go completely numb to the world.
Those are the only 2 options left.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about it like looking at the world through a smartphone camera.
Okay, I like this.
For the 16 veterans who saw the horror, it's like a blood-soaked horror movie filter has been permanently glued over the camera lens. No matter where they pointed, a family picnic, a sunny day, a random ink blot, the picture comes out looking like a terrifying war zone.
Right, they can't turn the filter off.
Exactly. But for the 5 guys who saw nothing, they just left the lens cap on. The screen is black.
That is a perfect analogy.
But I'm genuinely stuck on this. If your imagination is dead, if you literally cannot envision a new or different future, how do you even begin to take actionable steps to heal?
You don't.
You don't.
No, from a biological and psychological standpoint, imagination isn't just for daydreams or fantasy. It is the essential launch pad for making hopes come true.
So without it, you're just stuck.
Exactly. If you can't imagine a world where you feel safe, you have no goal to strive for. You have no internal motivation to engage in therapy or rebuild a fractured relationship.
Because you can't even picture what that would look like.
Right. The survivor is robbed of the ability to envision a way out. They are trapped in an endless loop of their worst moments, or stranded in a void.
Wow. So if your mind is walled off like that, where do you find any sense of connection? You end up seeking out the only people who understand the specific, terrifying filter you're looking through.
Which brings us to the author's discoveries during group therapy.
Yes. He started running support groups for veterans, young Marines from Vietnam, and later, older men who had fought in Patton's army in World War II.
And the dynamic in those rooms really highlighted the tragedy of this lost imagination. When the author asked these men about their daily lives, their wives, their children, their jobs, their mundane frustrations, the silence was agonizing.
They just didn't care.
They refused to engage with the present. It held absolutely no weight for them.
But the second one of them brought up a helicopter crash or a firefight, the room completely transformed.
The energy spiked.
Yeah, they spoke with intense passion. They only felt fully alive when recounting the horrors of the war.
It's such a paradox.
It is. It's like a shipwreck survivor who refuses to step onto dry land because they only feel comfortable clinging to the wreckage. The very thing that destroyed their lives became their only source of vitality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see how trauma sharply divides the world into those who know and those who don't.
Us versus them.
Exactly. The survivors feel that anyone who hasn't shared their specific horror simply cannot be trusted. Civilians expect them to just move on and be happy, which profoundly invalidates their reality.
So they retreat into the only tribe that speaks their language.
Yeah.
They were so bonded by this shared horror that they insisted the doctor leading the group become one of them to be trusted.
Oh, the gifts.
Yes. The Marines gave him a military uniform for his birthday. The World War II vets gave him a 1940s GI issue watch. They demanded he carry their symbols, initiating him into their trauma before they would even consider listening to him.
Because this isolation is a brilliant, albeit tragic, survival tactic. It protects them from the deep pain of being misunderstood.
Which is so relatable on a smaller scale, too. If you've ever watched someone you love absolutely refuse to engage with the present because they are obsessing over a past hurt, it's easy to assume they're just being stubborn.
Or holding a grudge just to be difficult.
Right. You take it personally. You think, why won't they just let it go and be happy with me?
But what this chapter reveals is that this stubborn isolation isn't malice. It is a biological adaptation to an unbearable experience.
Their nervous system only recognizes one frequency of high-stakes survival.
Exactly. The peace of the present moment just sounds like static to them.
So if their minds are completely walled off, and talk therapy requires mental flexibility to work, how on earth did anyone actually reach these patients?
It was a massive challenge.
Because the author hits a wall with traditional psychiatry. The pills aren't working. The talk therapy is just making them relive the trauma, agitating them further.
So he digs into the medical library.
Right, and he finds a book from 1941 by a psychiatrist named Abram Cardiner, who studied World War I veterans. Cardiner introduces a concept that becomes the nucleus of this entire deep dive. The nucleus of the neurosis is a physioneurosis.
Let's break that word down because it bridges a massive gap in how we understand human suffering.
Yes, please.
Physio refers to the physical body, the heart, the lungs, the muscles, the endocrine system. Neurosis refers to the mental distress. Cardiner is pointing out that trauma isn't just bad thoughts or a psychological weakness. It has a deeply physical, physiological basis.
So it's literally in the body.
Yes. When a person experiences a traumatic event, the body's internal alarm system, the amygdala, is triggered to keep them alive. It floods the body with stress hormones.
The classic fight or flight mode.
Exactly. But in trauma, that alarm gets stuck in the on position. The threat is long gone, but the physical organism is still continually mobilizing.
Cortisol and adrenaline are constantly pumping. The heart rate remains elevated. The muscles are perpetually braced for an impact that is never going to come.
The body is continually fighting for its life in the present moment against a ghost from the past. The rational brain might know the year is 2026, but the nervous system is completely convinced it is still 1978 in a rice paddy under fire.
Wait, I need to push back here.
Okay, go for it.
We've been told for decades that the absolute gold standard for treating trauma is talk therapy. You sit on a couch, you process the memories, you find the root cause, and you heal. Are you saying that entire approach doesn't work?
This raises an important question about the limitations of the rational mind. You can recount a traumatic story 100 times. You can logically understand that you are safe in a therapist's office.
Right.
But the rational thinking part of your brain has very little control over the primitive emotional part of your brain that controls your survival physiology.
So talking just doesn't reach that primitive part.
Exactly. If your body is still pumping stress hormones and your breathing is shallow, your rational mind's logic doesn't matter. The body overrides the intellect every single time.
So what does this all mean?
It means we have to change our approach entirely.
Think about your nervous system like a highly sensitive car alarm. Something smashed the window years ago, and now the alarm system is so hypersensitive and vigilant that a stiff breeze or a leaf touching the windshield sets off the blaring sirens.
That's a great visual.
You can't fix that by standing outside the car and calmly explaining to the alarm that it's just a leaf.
Right, the alarm doesn't understand English.
Exactly. You have to open the hood, get into the physical wiring, and manually reset the hardware.
And to reset that physiological wiring, talking is rarely enough. True healing requires physical experiences that viscerally contradict the helplessness of the trauma.
Viscerally contradict. Let's unpack that because it sounds like the key to everything.
It really is. During a traumatic event, the defining physical experience is profound helplessness. Your body wanted to fight or flee, and it couldn't.
The action was thwarted.
Yes, you were pinned down, trapped, or overpowered. To heal, the body has to experience the exact opposite physical sensation. It has to feel capable, grounded, and powerful in the present moment.
So you have to convince the physical body not the intellect, but the living, breathing nervous system, that the threat is gone.
You have to speak the body's language.
And that means engaging in movement, deep breathing, safe touch, or rhythmic activities. Things that require presence and physical mastery. The body has to physically keep the score of safety just as intensely as it kept the score of the trauma.
Taking back your life means learning how to master your own physical sensations. When you can regulate your breathing, calm your heart rate, and physically feel the ground beneath your feet, you send a biological signal of safety to the brain.
And only then does the imagination begin to thaw.
Exactly. Only then can you start envisioning a future again.
This is so powerful. Let's pull all of this together. We started with Tom, the living memorial, who showed us that trauma is a tragic loyalty that reorganizes reality and makes moving on feel like a betrayal.
We explored how that biological lockdown diverts energy from the imagination, leaving survivors either paralyzed by terrifying visual filters or staring into a blank void, completely unable to envision a better future.
And finally, the realization that changes everything the body is hosts is the true battlefield. Trauma isn't a moral failing or a sign of weakness. It's a physiological alarm system stuck in overdrive.
And understanding this strips away the blame.
It really does. When you or someone you love reacts with sudden rage or completely shuts down and isolates, it's just the body trying to survive a threat that isn't there anymore.
It allows for genuine compassion, shifting the question from what is wrong with you to what happened to you and how is your nervous system trying to manage it.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with something to really mull over. We constantly look for clean, binary diagnoses in life. We want the broken arm on the X-ray.
But trauma is murky.
It is. It lives in the shadows of the nervous system. It hides in the wiring. So here is our question for you. If trauma is a physical imprint that robs us of our imagination, what physical, real-world experiences could you engage in today? Be it movement, rhythm, or touch, that might slowly coax your body back into believing the world is safe enough to dream again.